A brief warning to the viewer. Because of the nature of adventure games in general, some of the content contained in this video could be construed as spoilers. While every effort has been made to remove as much spoiling content as possible and avoid giving away important elements of the plot, in the interests of delivering a competent and complete review, sometimes spoilers are inevitable. Also, some of these games are more than 20 years old, so if you haven't been spoiled by them already, I don't know how you managed that. And now, on with the show. When people think about adventure games, they tend to think of two companies, Sierra or LucasArts. If they're serious nerds, maybe they bring up Cyan Worlds or Telltale Games, or maybe Dreamcatcher Interactive and Legend Entertainment. But how often does someone mention Coktel Vision? How often? I know here in the United States of where I live, we don't ever. Maybe people do in Europe, but I don't live there, so I couldn't really say. Coktel Vision comes to us from the heart of France, where the people insert some joke about making fun of stereotypes here. Starting in 1987, the company shipped a number of licensed and unlicensed products, including 3 erotic, puzzle-centric adventure titles that were about as arousing as a bag of potato chips, and an Oliver and Company action game tie-in. Sometimes you just can't explain things. In the early 1990s, a publishing deal with Sierra was formed, giving international audiences access to Coktel's eccentric titles, such as the Adventure meets Shooting meets Full Motion Video meets Complete and Total Confusion Inca franchise, the Moon Logic Puzzle Fest of Goblins, and Lost in Time, an adventure game so infuriatingly obtuse it's become something of a legend for its pixel hunts and unwinnable situations. Maybe it was their tendency towards goofy, over-the-top animations, or bug-eyed character designs, or their love of taking logic, filling it full of cola and Mentos, then spinning it around on its own head until it wasn't sure which way was up, which way was down, and which was the way to the nearest place to vomit. But for whatever reason, Coktel Vision never got much of a foothold in the US. But we're not here to talk history and lament the passing of a unique creature too weird to live in our terrible world. Instead, we're going to celebrate the birth of one of their offspring, one of the last in fact, the Bizarre Adventures of Woodruff and the Schnibble of Azimuth, or, for short, Woodruff and the Schnibble. Woodruff is set in the suitably chaotic world of some future Earth. Nuclear Armageddon has damn near wiped out humanity, and the survivors spend their lives hiding away in isolation before returning to hopefully start things again. What they find is an entirely new culture called the Bazooks, long-nosed short things with huge ears and a lot of difficulty with the letter M. Bazook culture is built around a bizarre sort of spiritualism following 7 wise bazooks, a strong bond with nature, and a sort of guiding deity called the Schnibble. Everything is great and beautiful, peaceful and fair, until the surviving humans come out of their fallout shelters and decide to start a war to take back what they're fanatically sure is theirs. After losing the war, the Bazooks are dragged through a campaign of fast food, media oversaturation, and cultural assimilation until the wise Bazooks are made intellectually impotent, the Bazooks themselves are leashed into slavery, and the city is converted to an industrial wasteland run by a pair of leaders. One is the president, the figurehead who spews ineffectual and confusing propaganda to the masses while trying to figure out how to keep his pants up, while the other is the bigwig, a shadowy figure who sits in the background and actually controls the show. The bigwig's morals have been called into question, but any who challenge him, especially the Bazooks, end up locked away in the city's enormous and impenetrable prison. The last light of the people and the leader of the underground revolution is Professor Azimuth, but before he can put any plans into action, the bigwig has him kidnapped and locked away where he can do no more damage. Just before he's toted away, Azimuth hides his adopted son Woodruff along with the professor's latest and last invention, the Vibblefrotzer, which kickstarts Woodruff from a sobbing child to a sobbing adult. Admittedly, he's now a confused adult who doesn't know how to read, laments losing his teddy bear more than much of anything else, and has very little interest in sowing the seeds of dissent. But so he shall. One of the things that makes Woodruff feel different is its extensive vocabulary. While you have your ordinary things like elevators and offices and the like, you also have tobozons, big and portable, Burkers, Bluxterduts, Vibblefrotzers, Transportazons, Brotoflatrons, and a few others. You'll buy specialized prostheses, chase down the hostess of an erotic talk show. No, you never see anything. Talk to an appropriately named lovebird, travel through time, speak in tongues. It's fairly safe to say that nearly nothing in Woodruff outright makes sense until you bend your head around the unique world of the Bazooks. It's very well developed, even if large portions of it are complete and total fluff that feeds the slightly dark humor of a society gone completely mad. If anything brings the game down, it's that right there. While it can take immense leaps of logic to get through the early and some of the middle portions of the game, it isn't that hard, as your options are fairly limited and trial and error should get you by. Later on, some puzzles get much less fair and more outlandish, and at least one segment simply requires that you wander around and do random things to force a character to appear and grant you essential powers. It's impossible to completely make the game unwinnable, and there's only a handful of game over scenarios where something happens to Woodruff that makes him unable to fight the bigwig. Woodruff also constantly insists that the player picks up the pace, and it begins to grate like sand in your jockstrap after a bit, and sometimes the game is just a little too into its silly vibe, using nonsense animations rather than explanations to indicate why something doesn't work. Watching Woodruff pull out a walk bazooka and listen to music rather than use an item sometimes is meaningless, but it's supposed to tell you that you've done the wrong thing. I have to take off my rose-colored nostalgia glasses for a moment and be frank with you. Woodruff is full of technical issues and complaints. The inventory system is clumsy, though not on the level of Discworld's abomination, and there's absolutely no way to examine an item unless that's the only thing you can do with it. Not sure if that gas can actually has gas? Wondering what a tobozon actually is? Sucks to be you. All you can do is take it or use it. Some puzzles, like getting the factory job, are strictly sequenced and involve a laundry list of items that you can only get after you're told you need them by failing the puzzle. The hat packing job itself is an exercise in vague instructions and frustration. Most NPCs have multiple conversation blocks, but a few reset themselves after every one. It's particularly annoying with the Taste-Wise man, whose door requires you unlock it with a 4-phrase digicode every single time you want to talk to him. The digicodes themselves are a pain in the arse to the point where the game actually lampshades it, and eventually you stop getting the big labeled buttons of the tobozon, and you have to use tiny hotspots on button panels in the game world. There's sometimes no feedback when you get an item. Woodruff walks abominably slow, and his paths are not the best designed ones. Getting the master skills, which is required to finish the game, is completely without context, clues, or even an indication you're supposed to be doing it. He just appears in places when you do certain things, and if you don't do something easily missed in a completely different scene, he doesn't exist in the game at all. And the final act of the game is over so suddenly you'll almost think you missed something, especially compared to the much longer and more complex sequence where you save the 7 wise men. My verdict on Woodruff is mostly favorable, but not without a twitch of trepidation. It's a solid adventure game, of that there's no doubt, and it really does become the crowning achievement of Coktel Vision's limited library. They produced a pair of games afterwards for Sierra, an interactive movie/crime thriller called Urban Runner, and a futuristic adventure game peppered with combat called The Last Dynasty. Neither one was very notable, and after Sierra sailed to Havas, Coktel Vision fell into making educational games for the European market. It's sad that at times the game's personality overwhelms everything else, and a number of slam-your-head-on-the-wall puzzles will leave you frustrated, especially when the third act ends quite suddenly, but it's fun while it lasts. There is no replayability, so don't expect anything unless you've forgotten how to play the game between the last time. Here at Unpopular Opinion, I don't give ratings on some arbitrary scale, so there's no 5 Larrys out of 22 or 27.77777 on the Blodo Flatronizer. Instead, we send Woodruff and his adopted father off into the sunset, his adventure, such as it is, complete and no sign of a sequel anywhere in sight. Coktel Vision folded in 2004 after one last PlayStation 2 release in Europe. It's a shame, but it's something we adventure gamers should be familiar with, that feeling of loss as a competent developer disappears into the mists. So, thank you for watching, and after the credits, there'll be some spoilerish tips and perhaps a guide through a puzzle or two. Thanks for watching. I'm Flynn Church, and this has been Flynn Church's Unpopular Opinion. So what can I tell you that will make Woodruff and the Schnibble of Azimuth any more playable than it already is? I can't quite stress enough that you need to take everything that it's possible to take. As I said before, there are no red herrings in this game. All the items that you pick up have some value at some point, so anything that stands out graphically and has a hotspot, you need to at least try to pick it up. There are items that seem to be completely useless, like the underwear button that you find very near the beginning of the game, but these do have uses. The only red herring in the game is, in fact, the red herring. Woodruff unlocks new areas to visit in the city by tripping certain events. If you can't get any place else because stuff is blocking your way, you need to do something else first. For instance, at the very beginning of the game, you can't go through the stairs because the government officials are blocking your way. You need to go to the Wino's bar first and talk to J.F. Sebastian, but to do that, you need to get the boots from the thief underneath the bridge. That's not exactly a hard puzzle, so I'm not going to give you the solution. After you're done using the chewing gum, you're not done using the chewing gum. Make sure you pick it back up, or you can't finish the game. No, seriously, I mean that. One of the channels on your tobozon is a weather channel where a rather strained meteorologist tells you about incredible weather events happening throughout the city. This is actually really important, and you'll need to use this channel and actually abuse this channel to force things to happen in the right area. If you're stuck in the Bazooka Hat Factory, the key to finishing is to succeed at least once, but then express your displeasure with your working environment with the management. The game will go from there. There is, to the best of my knowledge, exactly one optional item in the entire game, the Transportazon, which lets you zing around the city through a menu rather than climbing through its complete chaos geography. To get this item, you'll need to be able to get to the Bazooka Temple and get the Time-Wise Man syllable, so he'll grant you past power. Getting the Transportazon, on the other hand, requires that you dance backwards in time with past power, make an ass out of an otherwise dignified if somewhat clueless man, change the outcome of the human Bazooka War just a little bit, and then take advantage of something you added during your dalliances in the past.